Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Go Fast, Grow Fast, where we talk about growing revenue, growing your business, what's working today from people in the trenches. I am joined by Josh today, and I am so excited. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Sean. I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad you found me and sought me out.
That's right. I'm excited. And Josh, why don't you introduce yourself? Let people know who they're listening to.
Yeah, I'm Josh Webb. I'm a longtime kind of agency veteran and fractional CMO out of Atlanta. I say I live in Atlanta because that's most of Georgia, but anybody that lives like inside of Atlanta would be offended. So I live in greater Atlanta. And anyway, happy to be here and help out however I can.
That's great. Maybe tell us a little bit about what your agency does, just to give people an idea of the type of work that you're focused on nowadays.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I've been in the agency space here in Atlanta, and what that meant is I was working for a lot of big brands like UPS and Under Armour and stuff like that. And we had our beds at the agency, and big campaigns would go out, and you have to manage the 30 people or whatever it is. And so I did that for a little over a decade. One thing that I started learning through, we have a little bit of a startup community around here in Atlanta, like a lot of people are starting to get. And I had owner after owner coming to me saying, we can't really afford a full-time CMO yet. However, we are getting in our third round of funding, and we're ready to start actual marketing and investing and branding and marketing and everything. So, so I started, kind of fell into it, this kind of, fractional, which, my friend says, why don't you just say part-time? And I go, because that doesn't sound as good as fractional.
That's not sexy. We don't do that.
No, that's like working at Subway, but it's the people I've gotten to work with, cool camping apps. I've gotten to work with a lot of companies that have been around for a while, but have never invested in marketing. And what I slowly do is I start as maybe the kind of single person, and then I build up the team, and I built the processes, and I slowly replace myself, and then I move on. And so I've been doing that for about 6 years, and we started the Breezy Company, which is the company that me and a person out of Austin, Savannah, we started this together. And the reason was kind of coming out of that was many times I was sitting down with these companies, and we would work out elaborate strategies, and there would be a big portion of it that was organic content marketing. And then they said they would take it internal, and they would, give it to their people to do every week or something like that. And 6 months would go by and there would be nothing. And so they asked me to solve that problem. Oh yeah. They asked me to solve that problem, and we either found freelancers from Fiverr, or we found like expensive PR companies. And there wasn't a whole lot of choices for kind of a machine to run in the background to accomplish some of these big strategies that we wanted. Right. Or even what the agency would do a lot of times was create really cool stuff and then hand it to the company and say, all right, that was fun.
Right.
And so we have walked right in the middle of that, and that's sort of turned out into a bit of a staffing model. How do we get the right teams in place for these companies?
Yeah.
And then, and also provide them the processes and strategy rather than, like a specific campaign.
Right.
Long answer, but that's it.
No, that's awesome, and that's great. It's a very familiar story. First, it's awesome because you with that timing, that was when fractional CMOs weren't. That wasn't even sexy back then. Like people didn't even know what that was really. So you're really at the edge of that becoming a thing. You've seen that grow, I think, as an industry. But that's now a very common problem for a lot of the fractionals that I've talked to is you do the strategy, you tell them what they need to do, and then they say, now, how do I do it?
I heard the other day that it's like, you're a consultant when you're getting paid to tell somebody to do something that they then put next to the other books of work that they did.
Yes, exactly.
So, we're consulted, and sometimes we're listened to.
Right. Every now and then when the lightning strikes just right. So I think, I some point in this conversation, I want to dive a little bit into, growing the agency and that path that you work through. But I want to start with a lot of the stuff that you're doing for clients around content. Content is so pivotal, and producing it is hard. That's why you have an agency. So I guess what do you see as kind of the most important thing to get right when you're approaching content as a business?
The primary thing that we end up talking about quite a bit is story. I just happen to be a story brand guide. If you guys have heard of Building a Story Brand by Don Miller, the reason I'm a guide is for about 15 years. It's so similar to the kind of things I was already doing.
Yeah.
And he just explained it really well, and then made $1 billion. So it's like
you did it first. Come on, Josh.
Oh yeah, it's like my dad. He sold the first flat screen TV, and he was like, "I should have made it." Shit, come on, dude. But yeah, so it was very similar. So I mean, the kind of things I tend to take my clients through, especially if they say something like, we serve so many different people, and almost anybody could use our product in some way, or is that I try to tell them, like, you're serving a person, and that person that you're serving doesn't really care about your company, as cool as it may be. What they really care about is the kind of things they're going through, the challenges, the thing that they want, and the things that are getting in the way of them accomplishing that thing. And if they have to hire your company or whatever to solve that problem, that's fine. And in the second, and when it's really not, then, good knowing you, and they'll move on. And so what I do is we work pretty hard at trying to identify either the commonalities or the specific nature of what the person really wants. And sometimes it gets kind of personal. Like, sometimes we do identify the fact that it's like, oh, this specific C-suite audience wants to keep their job. And how they're going to do that is by being able to report how they're doing to somebody. And it gets a little personal about that. But, what we try to do is identify that thing they want, walk them through what's getting in the way. And then the story starts telling itself. Like, we reposition them as the guide. And we get into a place where we're really focusing specifically on what that person wants and how you're going to guide them through your process to get them there. Even if you have, and it really does work, even if you have a product or a service company.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I think it's easy to lose the human aspect when you're looking at data about impressions and page views and time on site. It's easy to forget each one of those it's a human on the other side of the screen, and those humans have desires, wants, and needs. And how are you addressing those for that person? And in the B2B space too, we always talk about the fact that there's a lot of it is much more fear driven than in B2C. It's fear of, am I going to lose my job because I bet on your product?
Yeah.
And that's a big thing to take into consideration. When you're thinking about positioning and the story that you're going to be telling.
Well, you're right in the fact that, especially in the B2B space, we're talking about so much big stuff that rarely is it your specific purpose that immediately drives the only revenue. It's like, if you're the marketing department, well, it depends on how good the salespeople were. And the salespeople were driving there, the marketing department wasn't giving me enough leads. But if you're both, then it depends on how good the product is. And then it's like, and all of them can be a domino effect. And so It really is important that you get it all right. And that's why when I talk to a lot of startup founders, they think that they have the right story already. And I'm not claiming I'm going to give them the right story. What I claim I'm going to do is get the story out of them, or in many ways, the problem that they're solving for their customers, we're going to get the story out of them.
Right.
And, many of my customers don't have the budget to go do let's go do a focus group with, everybody's seen like Mad Men and all the lipstick commercial. And it's like, and that's how it happens. But I mean, even then, I recall when I used to do work for UPS, we did this big whiteboard campaign. And I remember doing the interactive portion where we had a button, and then we were literally behind one of those mirrors, and all the people were looking at it. And this person looked right at the button that said, "Get started." And he goes, "How do I get started?" And I got so mad.
Great.
And they made me click here to get started.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
So I say all of that to say, like, a really good story, it permeates more than just what you're going to say in your headline. It permeates the purpose of your company. It permeates how the employees work together, what your values might be, and why those values match with the product you've made.
Right.
And then all of that resonates with your audience, especially if you've solved a problem with them. I mean, most likely somebody else has also solved that problem. And so the reason they're going to choose you is probably because you relate to them better, or the way they like to identify themselves relates to you better. And all that stuff, it's kind of hard to figure out the ROI.
Yeah. 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 No, that's that getting hyper specific. It's such a good mechanism for actually building out clarity. You kind of started out by talking about our product is good for, a whole bunch of people, and when you're at that level, that's probably true. But now you're trying to make such general, broad statements that nobody relates to it.
Nobody relates to it. And nowadays, because nobody has that much attention, like you're not, Ovaltine on the Ed Sullivan show. Were they on Ed Sullivan? I don't know. But you're not that. And so people do have, like, they're going to spend 20 seconds on your website. And what you're hoping to do is grab them close, like with something that they resonate enough where they can say, "That's me."
Right.
And then they're willing to browse a little bit more to see, is this important?
Right.
And so, it's different for B2C, like if you're eating Doritos or something like that, versus if you're buying a big product. But people are still looking for that thing. And so what I want to do is talk a second about what that has to do with thought leadership, because at first glance they may seem like two different things, but they're really not. So if you think about what your story is and the problems that you're solving, those are the things that are going to connect your message and what you're saying to your people. Well, when you have thought leadership, essentially the whole reason for it is to build trust, ongoing trust with your audience. And if you're building a trust about things they don't care about, or a stance that they don't really relate to,
right,
or that maybe somebody else is better, or and being a little entertaining on top of that would be great. If you're doing those things that are not doing those things, they really can't build a relationship with you. And that means the only way they can deal with you is by entering into the glorious sales conversation that that they all want to have. And instead of being able to pay attention to you and say, "Oh, I like what they're saying, and this actually solves a challenge that my group has actually had, I want to start a conversation with that person." And that doesn't necessarily look like filling out a lead form. Right. Sometimes it looks like reaching out on LinkedIn because I like the last 6 months worth of content you've been putting out.
Yep.
And it's quality, by the way, which makes me think that you might do quality work for me.
Right. Yeah. No, I think the term thought leadership has been battered and bruised a little bit. It's come to mean the guy who stands on the TED Talk stage, right? And it's like that's the simplest form. To your point, it's about you're adding valuable thoughts to the conversation that somebody cares about. And that can take a lot of forms. That could be a podcast like this. It could be on the TED Talk stage. It could be in an article in a white paper, right? It's how is your audience going to engage and what do they care about?
Right. And on top of that, I would say that you don't necessarily have to be have to be an influencer. What the targeted people that you really care about. So I'll say that again so you can have it. The targeted people that you really care about, it might be 100 really good prospects or 1,000 really good people that are building trust with you over time. And those are the people that you care about. I have a story of a content client that's been working with us. They provide fuel services for big power companies. And for them, one thing that's pretty interesting is that they have all of this knowledge all over their team that just doesn't, I mean, it just goes into doing their daily jobs. Yep. And when we start to dig into how these customers make the decisions and the things that they're really irritated about, and then you start asking them, they go, oh, well, you know how gas prices work. They actually work like this and this and this, and they don't come from the president saying we're going to save money on gas. Like and that becomes really, really solid content because they can actually maybe make some decisions on it, or they can decide that you are the kind of company that could maybe solve this issue they've had because you have some expertise. And that wasn't the founder. That wasn't the face of the company. That was just, somebody doing their job that we asked to be on an interview. And the other thing is that sometimes you put content out there and it's not necessarily going to be for a new lead. You put out content out there for the current customers paying attention to, and they really like what you have to say. Well, turns out another department is actually paying attention to what they have to say too. And they start to wonder, I like that thing you shared. Do you work with them? Yeah, we work with them on this and this and this and this. And now all of a sudden you're presenting to that person. And so there's a lot of intangibles. There are definitely ways to measure them. But there's a lot of branding intangibles that come into proving that are putting my expertise on display. That's probably a better way to say it to help people.
I think a big part of that challenge is every organization has a bunch of smart people in it. It wouldn't have grown to where it is if it didn't. But how do you draw that out? For you, how when you get hired as an agency, your job is to find those nuggets, right? Like you need to produce content that's going to deliver results. How do you approach that, especially as an outside vendor, coming into a company, even if it is a smaller company? What do you do to uncover those gems?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we say is that we're never going to be the subject matter expert. We actually have some healthcare clients and some like experimental, there's no way. I mean, they're scientists.
Just go get a PhD, you'll be fine.
Oh yeah. So we're not providing them content. What we're doing is we're uncovering it. So the primary thing is exactly like we were talking about with the story, is like it's trying to figure out, okay, what are the things that really get on your customers' nerves, and then what do you do about those kind of things? And then you start and you make a beautiful mind map that shows all these different things, and you'll discover that you've got about 100 different themes that you could talk about that has to do it directly with the customer. And then when you start to realize that was just one vertical, and that each one of those pieces of content can be syndicated across, 100 pieces of content, right. Gary Vee style, right? So when you start to think about that, then it becomes a time thing. How am I going to produce all this content?
Yep. No, that's great. And so I want to pivot the conversation a little bit and focus a little bit on the growth of your agency over the years. You've been running this for 5 years now. Is that right?
Yeah. And my partner would like to say, no, she's been running it.
She's not here today, so she doesn't get the last word here.
It was actually a very important growth strategy for me personally, as about 15 years older than her or something like that. That for me, it was actually important to start creating businesses, that I didn't run. And so I think I read something recently that said the difference between somebody that is an entrepreneur versus somebody that owns their job is that, a lot of people just create something that they have a job at. Is like when you don't have to work in the business is when you've actually become an entrepreneur and start creating businesses. So I love doing it. And because I've done it for so long for so many other people, like, about 5 years ago, we thought we'd give it a stab.
Yeah, that's great. So talk a little bit about that journey from, the beginning. You're starting out. Did you have clients when you started out, or did you have like some relationships that you kind of kickstarted it with and you grew from there, or how did it kind of begin?
Well, I mean, so I've had an agency before, and a pretty successful agency. We had about 10 employees or something, kind of boutique. And it was the traditional thing. It was go and find clients, do the project work, try to get them on retainer. And that doesn't give,
Yep.
I mean, and that problem only changes with more zeros behind it when you become bigger. And so, and with that company, we got so tired at the very end, had a bunch of, single points of failure that led to us just being exhausted and closing it down. But there was a lot of lessons that I learned that had me saying, the traditional agency model is kind of for the birds, at least for me personally, because I didn't want to live that life. That wasn't the life I wanted to do. And yet I couldn't do a job. So I was in this really horrible place where it's like, I got to make something because that's who I am.
Yep.
But I don't want to, be a slave to my own position. So, I mean, what it really started doing, like I mentioned before, is we had clients. I had clients that were fractional CMO clients. And what I started seeing as a problem that I was creating really for myself by working with these companies that were a little bit smaller. And when I say smaller, like, towards the bottom end of mid-sized business to the top end of small business. But they couldn't necessarily afford to produce this whole thing that I was talking about. And so, so really what I started doing is going, what I need is this problem solved? Why hasn't anybody solved this problem? And so I started reaching out to my partner, Savannah. And at the time, she was just taking kind of random social media work from me. And she used to be on my team as a project manager. And I said, if we could figure out how to systematize this, every consultant would be served, and a lot of small businesses would be served, because this is an actual big problem. It's not creating quality content isn't the problem. Creating consistent quality content at less than I could hire somebody for.
Yep. That's
the problem you have to solve for. And then from a business standpoint, we even knew and we can't have this be project based, because cash flow, it works so much better with predictable revenue.
Yep.
And so how are we going to solve this problem with subscriptions? And so that's where we started as Breezy Content. Now we created Breezy Sites, and, we fluctuate between 40 and 50 clients, and, we keep trying to get that more and more, but it's now becoming a thing where they're cross-pollinating, and we're offering the same kind of thing that an agency might say, but we say specifically, we are not an agency. We're giving you the marketing teams and the process you need, and then we're managing that process.
That's great. So right now, I always have to ask this of any sort of agency or consultant is, are you using your own services to grow your company? Are you relying on content to, position yourselves as thought leaders and, generate revenue?
Gotcha. Sure hope so. No, we definitely are. And we say it all the time, like, primarily, like, if we don't, how bad does that look for our service and our brand?
Yeah.
So no, we actually have done that. Like, we actually have our own content creator. We actually have it line item. We pay for our own service, just like a company would. And it actually worked out good, because then we didn't try to say, oh, they can get this done whenever. We said, nope, this is how much it costs. And every time we bring on a new service line, we also pay for that and give that to them. Yeah, we do. And we just finished a great case study for consultants that we're starting to hand out, and we produce, it's a blog post every week, and we send it out by email, and we put it up. And we're doing lots of TikTok stuff now. So we do it ourselves, But we find that it's a lot of social proof. It's not necessarily always the thing that generates the lead. It's the people checking up on us to see if we're doing what we said. And there's no way that can just be us that's happening to, by the way. That's definitely happening to the people watching this show.
Yep, absolutely. No, that's, I think, more common than most people have any conception of. As you've, been building your agency and kind of building out how many clients there are, have there been any kind of plateaus or walls that you've had to break through, or different phases that you've seen? Like maybe it started out because you had fractional clients and you just referred them in, but where did that next batch come from? Does that look different today than it did when you were starting?
Oh yeah. Well, we had sort of the what did Steve Jobs say, that they would ask for a better BlackBerry, where we sent out a pitch deck and we asked everybody, would you use a service? And they all said no. And then I had to say, like, I know they would use this service because I would use the service because they're already asking me for this. So they're just saying no because it's a new idea, I think. That's not always the case. Right. But and so that was a little bit of a just pushing past and believing it. But no, there was certain things where we realized that totally different talent to be able to create social media content than it is to write a great article. And I would say that less of it had to do with marketing, because marketing was this promise that we're making. What was the really hard thing was to make the promise true internally. So make the operations of it be as true as we're saying it was. And then when people, like, I refused anytime I did a little bit of graphic design. I used to be an art director a long time ago. So I did a little bit of graphic design when we started. And then at a certain point I go, you know what? I've got to stop this because this has nothing to do with the process. And it's got to be included in how we charge. And that's the biggest thing, is that taking the story and what people were actually irritated about. And probably even right now we're trying to solve it. A lot of our clients, like, we're saving time for them by being breezy, right? We're Breezy Content.
Yep.
But there are some people there that they have created a situation for themselves that are so busy they can't even attend a meeting.
Right.
And what do you do for somebody that knows they need to produce content, and you're going to help them solve this problem, but they're so busy they can't even answer a question?
Yep.
Well, can they just not be a client, or is that just not the right target, or is that a problem that we have to solve?
Right. And how do you personally, solve that? Like, how do you avoid recreating the agency life that you wanted to avoid, where you put the bed under your desk and you're just sleeping here running this job all day? Like, what are you doing to stop that? Because I think with certain personality types, I'm not, pointing fingers at anybody here, it's easy to see, here's a problem, I must go fix, I must go figure out the new solution to that. And suddenly, you're working 80 hours a week, no problem. How do you avoid just falling right back into old traps?
Well, this is potentially a good segue into a more personal story, but what I would say is that the primary thing for me is I've learned to sort of share the wealth and to not be scared about, my own insecurities of having to be like the really, really smart one. And what that means is that, like, I'm willing to share equity with people that are still learning, or that maybe where I'm at. So I've gotten pretty good at finding hungry people. I don't mean like they want a burger. I mean, like, they just like they want it. They got to drive, and they're really sharp. And I kind of have gotten okay with, I've just been the person in the room so many times saying things that are probably above my pay grade because I didn't know any better, and having an older person just look at me and shake their head and And I have decided to be the kind of person that's willing to listen to those people because they're smart.
Right. Right.
And, they may not know what they don't know, but they're smart. And so, and so that's one, but the other thing is that in creating this company, I was forced to slow down for about a year, to where I was so grateful for that decision, and I believe it's a God-led decision where it was one of these things where it's like, I decided 5 years ago to start this company. And luckily I had a friend that was at a good season of life. She was like, yeah, let's do it. And then in all of that time, I basically got a diagnosis out of nowhere. I know it was out of nowhere because I had just bought an Expedition, and I just put a tow controller on it from the car, and I was picking up, and I was just driving home, and my doctor called me, and he said, there was a couple things that were wrong with my eyes for some reason, and he said, hey, just to make sure, let's just go get an MRI. And he's like, you have got a 3.5 centimeter brain tumor that is pushing against your brainstem. It's not cancerous, thank God, but it's big, and it's pushing against your brainstem. And if we don't get it out this month, you're going to have a stroke.
Whoa.
And I hadn't been to the doctor in like 6 years. I'm not saying as a matter of fact, that year, like the years before that, I was super into CrossFit. I was probably the healthiest I'd ever been.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, there's no real reason that thing was growing. But they take about 10 years to grow. It's called acoustic neuroma. And it came out, it was growing through my ear. And so I ended up having to have brain surgery. It took about 8 hours. And when they did that, I'm a musician too. I've been also playing and stuff like that for a long time. So they had to take out the hearing in this ear in order to get to the part of the brain that they needed to get to. And after they did that, they realized it was all attached to all the nerves in my face. So if you see me winking, it's not because I just love to wink. It's because my nerves are confused and think I want to wink. But they were all attached. And so it just took a doctor skillfully going in, detaching every single one of those nerves from the tumor. In his words, you had no rookie problem. He was the head of neurosurgery at Emory.
Wow.
Which I just also happened to get. And so after that, literally, and this is almost a separate story, but after that, I couldn't, this whole half was paralyzed, basically down to my arm, but it wasn't like a full stroke, but I couldn't walk.
Right.
I had no sense of balance, and this was not like going to be solved in a couple days. It took me about a year to recover. And my wife you don't know love until your wife gives you a shower. But that whole time, I'm not individually wealthy. I still got to work. And so I still tried to attend meetings but I was confused sometimes, a lot of medication.
Yep.
And the other partner, she was working a lot, but because I delegated to her, because I did the hard work of setting up the company, which was a lot of things like all the processes and automation and branding and messaging and who are we going to hire for this? It was all done.
Right.
And and we'd had a year or two to get used to it.
Right.
So that on year 3, I could recover for a year from something I had no idea that was coming.
Yep. That's the thing, is that you don't know what is unexpected. It's in the definition, like things can come out of nowhere, right? They can hit you at any time. It's actually inevitable in business that you're going to have unexpected events, and some are more potentially catastrophic than others, but you're going to get hit and things are going to go sideways. And have you invested in building resiliency into your organization? And, for me, that's what a lot of it comes down to, right? And that resiliency comes from processes and people, right? And that seems to be what you had in place at just the right time.
Yeah, well, it was because of a lot of failures that I decided to go that route. But it was also the kind of life I wanted to lead. But afterwards, I just have such a different take on life now that I really, I do this and I build businesses because I like to, and because it's a lot of fun. But to me, it's a poker game. I mean, it's like, it's not like it was before. It's not my meaning or something.
Yep. 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 No, that's an amazing story, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because it really does. It reminds you what the point of business is.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we're coming up on time here, and there's one more topic that I want to make sure we get to, and that is talking about processes and people. I want to shift over to AI, and I have to ask every guest how you are using AI in your day-to-day or with clients, and how far off are you from fully replacing your job with AI so you can just go build a new business?
First of all, I'll say I have no clue. No, we've had this talk extensively at Breezy, mostly because part of our conversations with clients, like, we had questions that go, do you guys just go into ChatGPT and say, write me an article that, and we say, so this is how we say it. And we have to remind the people that we bring in to actually be a content creator that this is how we work as well, because they could actually say, oh, wow, I can write these articles really easily. We look at everything that AI does as a tool. Matter of fact, I just saw a documentary that was all about, ILM. I don't know if you've seen that on Disney Plus. It's like, but I didn't know that when they made their first Star Wars movie and all that kind of stuff, they had to actually make it, they had to trim film strip, right? And had to put it all together. And it was actually George Lucas's like, this is so annoying. I wish I could just, and they invented digital film editing.
Right.
And so what that shows me, the same thing, with they ended up moving on to 3D animation from claymation, right? Or stop motion. So I think it's a significant one, but it's like the same jump that we made into 3D or something. It creates, your imagination can happen easier. And, I have sat down, like, whenever you sit down with ChatGPT, I'm sure it'll get better, and you don't know what to tell it, and you don't know what you're actually looking for. It writes the dumbest things. Now, I'm sure it'll get better, but that's why knowing your story is so good. That's why knowing the kind of thing I'm trying, the reaction, because then you can actually act like it's a junior copywriter. And it's a very good sounding board, actually.
Yeah.
I end up saying things like, okay, if you had this problem, and you were this market, and what are the kinds of things that you would want answers to?
Yep.
And then it might kind of give me, well, like this and this and this. And I go, yeah, but what about this? And it'll go, well, yeah, that's true. And I'll go, do you have an article about that? Yeah, here's an article. And I'll go read that article. So it's a really good sounding board. I also use that as a way of sometimes I'll put things in for a business plan or for a marketing plan, and I'll actually say, are there questions I'm not asking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just list them out.
Yep.
Now I know what questions I can answer.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I know the answers to those questions. I just didn't think to ask them.
Right.
So, and there are things that, when you're out of ideas, like you say, here's a headline I'm thinking of. Can you give me 20 more?
Yep.
Then in 2 seconds it goes,
yep.
And what I find myself doing is going, oh, that's a good idea. And I don't really like the headline that it wrote, but I like where it was going.
There's a
So I kind of almost use it like a junior designer or something like that. Or, where it's like, I like where you're going with this, but tweak this. And I think it's really cool that they can do that. I absolutely love Midjourney.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I would do it for fun. Just...
Yep.
No, but I find myself like, everybody has the stock libraries and all that kind of stuff. You always prefer, but what I have is a unique thing for a lot of startups. They're having to market before they are to market yet.
Right.
And so there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that goes into, pretending that these are real products, right? Well, it's awesome to be able to say, hey, show me something like this. And for the most part, it does it. It gets so close. Right. And even with like version 6 and all that kind of stuff, it's like where they used to have problems with fingers and all that kind of stuff. and that's what people don't realize is the things that you're making fun of, it'll be solved like next week.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how fast it's going. So that's what we try to do is I use probably 6 tools on a normal basis now, or it wasn't in my workflow last year.
Yep.
But the main thing is that they're tools. And I still continue to believe that you'll always need the human imagination to tell stories and things like that. It might do a good job faking it, and look, when I'm wrong, we're gonna all get shot by Terminator anyway, and Skynet's gonna take over, so it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
I'll be in the pile of bones.
Yeah, exactly. It won't be a problem for you anymore.
Not me.
Yep.
My kids maybe.
Yeah.
So having problems.
Let's let them deal with that. Exactly. Well, I've really enjoyed the time today. This conversation has been fantastic, and I think people are going to get a lot of value out of it. We like to close out, are there any recommendations you have, books, podcasts, anything that you'd want to share with the audience?
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say I'll use a shameless plug to say we also started a podcast with the Breezy team called Marketing on the Move.
Nice. And we'll put a link to that in the description as well. So everybody,
it's just a bunch of our teammates answering questions and talking about trending topics and things like that.
Unlocking all that knowledge locked in the team, right?
Yeah, we've got to do the same thing. So,
Exactly.
but in terms of books, one that is always I almost said stuck with me because it's called Made to Stick. Made to Stick by the Heath brothers, I think is a fantastic book. And I think at this point it's probably 10, 15 years old, but it's a really good book on writing things that matter to people and that stick in their minds.
Nice.
And it has this awesome chapter that I bring up all the time called The Curse of Knowledge. That is like, it's gold. Oh yeah, it's stuck. But Building a Story Brand by Don Miller, I think it's a great resource. Things I've been doing it for years, but he explained it better. And so if you're wanting to know the idea behind it, do it or read it, and don't do it yourself. Other things, if you're interested in a little bit more of my story on my journey through what it's like to have a business during times of tragedy or whatever, you can look at Success and Suffering Life. I wrote a book about that. My sister is a novelist, and I wrote every thought that I ever had, and the book was only this big. So, well, but that's what I pay attention to. I'm actually in my autonomous work pod right now. It's a 8x11, a really awesome kind of like cool Swedish design kind of thing that is in my backyard. And I love this thing.
Nice. That's a good.
So if you're looking for something, if you're working at home and you can't stand it,
yep.
somehow walking from here to my house, I feel like I'm walking home.
Nice. That's great. That's a really good piece of advice. As someone who has worked from home for over a decade, I can attest to the separation of spaces and how valuable that is. So, well, thank you again, Josh. This has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate it so much. There is a ton of value in there. Are there any closing words you want to share?
Man, the only thing I would say is just remember why you do what you do, and that you're not stuck there. Like, focus on your life and figure out why you're living.
Amazing. Great closing words. Well, thank you again, Josh, and I hope everybody enjoys this episode.